Nintendo is moving ever more into audio-visual content, but between features, shorts, and television series, what kinds of media really best showcase their core franchises? Of course, so far, we've only seen three types of application of Nintendo's IP in the audiovisual space. With Mario, they've gone for animated features. This makes sense because Mario is a bright, family-friendly character, and a movie is probably the most high-profile way to draw people in. I'm not sure that this is the whole extent of what Nintendo might do with Mario, and there's a potential for other spin-offs both within and without the world of features, but it's clearly a solid starting point, and by inaugurating Chris Meledandri onto Nintendo's board of directors, they are keen to learn from their partners at Illumination how best to succeed in the international features market. Meledandri, of course, being the head of Illumination, the group behind the Mario movie. Second of all, we have Zelda, where they have gone the live-action route. Again, we know that Zelda's age demographics skew on the older end of Nintendo franchises, and so a live-action approach is probably more likely to cement that broad appeal. With modern special effects and successful fantasy properties in recent decades, such as the Hobbit films, Game of Thrones, and more, the potential is massive to aspire to capture the same kind of space that the Narnia or Lord of the Rings films managed: iconic, authentic, well regarded. Then there's the Pikmin shorts, both the 2025 Close to You experience and the previous Pikmin shorts, which kind of started Miyamoto's cinematic journey and which are experimental to a high degree but can also be nimble and off-kilter, as well as being viewed on phones, which feels particularly appropriate for Pikmin, which is after all focused on the small and viewing the familiar through a surprising new lens. I wouldn't say that these will be the only options for these franchises going forward, but nevertheless, let's look at the best applications for some of the other IPs in Nintendo stables. Nintendo often quotes 9 franchises, although one of these is Donkey Kong, which seems set for its own spin-off film, and another is Pokemon, where I think Nintendo will let the Pokemon Company take the lead on their own franchise expansion efforts, something they're doing effectively as far as I can tell through hookups with Aardman Animations, as well as the long-established panoply of Pokemon media series. This leaves us Metroid, Kirby, Animal Crossing, and Splatoon out of the main franchises that Nintendo referred to in their investor relations briefings, and therefore the ones that are most likely to be prioritized for multimedia content in the medium term. With Metroid, it's difficult to imagine that anything other than a live-action film series could work well, but there is a difficulty with this. The series was heavily influenced by the Alien films, and while that worked well in games, there is a risk that transferring it back to the screen could make it seem derivative. Therefore, while suspense has always been a key part of Metroid, I don't think they would want to go for too edgy a rating, and will have content that sticks around the early teen banding that most of the Metroid games settle in at. Now, having said all this, I think there is a reason to think that Nintendo might not want to go for a film version of Metroid. The problem with a film is that box office numbers are highly transparent, and if the film bombs, then it will be a very public failure. I think Nintendo are confident that they can enforce some degree of quality, or at least something they're willing to stand behind, rather than another fiasco like the 90s Mario movie. But Metroid has never been a franchise that has had broad appeal, and if it's overlooked at the cinema as well, it could actually embarrass rather than flatter Nintendo. However, there is an option that has more potential, and that's a direct-to-streaming miniseries. Streaming numbers are generally kept silent until or unless there's something to brag about, and the barrier for entry to try something is far lower than having to go to the cinema, which is an expensive and time-consuming venture for customers, especially for an unproven property. The potential of serialization also introduces the potential for more thriller elements, including cliffhanger moments and twists, to be put front and center. The Metroid universe has a lot of moving parts, a terrific rogues gallery of villains, quite a few protagonists as well. A short serial, perhaps 4, 6, 8 parts, would have much more scope for differing elements of subterfuge, and by making these kind of water cooler moments sing, they would hope to bring people on board and immerse them in a more complicated and expansive story than those being told in their other franchise utilizations. Of course, this might not work if the episodes are all day one bingeable, but Nintendo has enough heft to impress upon streaming partners terms like this, especially when it's for a very logical reason. To be clear, I think a Metroid show such as this is probably years off, and that may be just as well given the special effects complexities such a venture would require, but I can certainly see this being one of the ways that Nintendo might raise the property's profile. Then there is Animal Crossing. Now, here's the thing about Animal Crossing: it is a cozy, personalized, daily check in game. It is not a get dressed up, get in the car, go to the cinema, find a parking spot, buy popcorn, watch 10 trailers, and then gorge on a massive audiovisual feast type experience. Of course, Animal Crossing has had a film previously, but I'm not convinced that this is the best strategy in order to promote the franchise. If anything, the closest experience for what Animal Crossing might be would be the soap opera. Daily slices of life that might not be the most high quality but are comforting and familiar and drive conversations and interest. I find the soap opera format rather fascinating personally because soaps generally are a great insight into national characteristics. British soaps tend to be hard-bitten and working class, with lots of worthy storylines. Australian soaps are full of sunny climes and attractive middle-class 20-somethings on beaches. American soaps are full of gaudy rich people flouting the law, while Mexican telenovelas are long, simmering romantic epics, and by all accounts, Italian soaps are more family-centric. Japan doesn't, as far as I can tell, have anything like this soap opera tradition, and the cost of mounting a soap opera will be significant enough in live action, let alone something with talking animals. However, I could absolutely see something far smaller scale, but using some of the same principles by encouraging familiarity and regular check-ins. An app that delivered regular 1 or 2 minute slice of life episodes could become a perfect cozy companion to the game. Little relatable scenarios, rushing to deliver a letter and falling in a puddle, falling out with a neighbour, or even tranquil moments of repose, like sitting and watching the rain, or the ASMR-like joy of using a roller on a wall that's being painted. The difficulty, of course, is that they would need to significantly expand the characters of the Animal Crossing world to make it really work, since if they only use known side characters like Isabelle, Gulliver and Tortimer, while that's fun, it might not really be capturing the ordinary slice of life of Animal Crossing with all sorts of different characters intermixing. Whether they could find a way to give the huge cast of potential Animal Crossing villagers slice of life encounters remains to be seen. Could this kind of thing engender viral viewership beyond the regular Animal Crossing audience? Well, possibly. And as for Splatoon, well, until now it's been mainly targeting middle schoolers, but that's because this is the demographic that responded to it most strongly at launch. However, the middle schoolers who played the first 2 Splatoon titles near launch will now be in their 20s, so it's not necessarily the case that the same strategies would work again. Nevertheless, I do think Splatoon is ideally placed as a Saturday morning cartoon. Bright, chaotic, with a brilliantly defined world with a bit of edge and coolness to it. Of course, there's a risk that if Nintendo mistimes it, they could end up having a how do you do fellow kids kind of vibe to it, but given the properties like Ninja Turtles and for that matter Sonic the Hedgehog seem to withstand endless reinvention, I'm sure a talented team of developers could give us something pretty awesome in the Splatoon universe, or at least certainly something that appeals to the key audience they want to bring into those games. But am I missing a trick? How would you like to see these games hit the big time? Let me know in the comments. Big thanks to the channel's Patreon members, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.